Thank you very much, everybody, for coming out on this second Saturday. I'll ask, since our Qari has arrived, I will ask him to start with the surah that we have on the screen in front of us.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والفجر وليال عشر والشفع والوتر والليل إذا يسر هل في ذلك قسم لذي حجر ألم تر كيف فعل ربك بعاد إرم ذات العماد التي لم يخلق مثلها في البلاد وثمود الذين جابوا الصخر بالواد وفرعون ذي الأوتاد الذين طغوا في البلاد فأكثروا فيها الفساد فصب عليهم ربك سوط عذاب إن ربك لبالمرصاد فأما الإنسان إذا ما ابتلاه ربه فأكرمه ونعمه فيقول ربي أكرمن وأما إذا ما ابتلاه فقدر عليه رزقه فيقول ربي أهانن كلا بل لا تكرمون اليتيم ولا تحاضون على طعام المسكين وتأكلون التراث أكلا لما وتحبون المال حبا جما كلا إذا دكت الأرض دكا دكا وجاء ربك والملك صفا صفا وجيء يومئذ بجهنم يومئذ يتذكر الإنسان وأنى له الذكرى يقول يا ليتني قدمت لحياتي فيومئذ لا يعذب عذابه أحد ولا يوثق وثاقه أحد يا أيتها النفس المطمئنة ارجعي إلى ربك راضية مرضية فادخلي في عبادي وادخلي جنتي.
صدق الله. Last week was a bit of a longish introduction to the Qur'an, to the atmosphere wherein the Qur'an was revealed. I just want to say that there are a few more chairs here in front. Yes, Ismail, you can come through. Sorry, my mind slipped onto something else now when I saw an MYM bag there. Where are those two bags? Two people left bags here last week. It was the two. Oh.
They weren't together.
And they weren't together. Both of you just forgot your bags. Oh. Okay. I can understand why your father forgot to wake up last night. Anyway. I already told everybody whose father it is before you came. Today something about the, you know that generally the surahs are divided into Makkiya or Madaniya, into Meccan surahs or Madani surahs. And sometimes there are different ways of defining them, before the hijrah or after the hijrah. And then there's a dispute about surahs that were revealed after the hijrah, whether they could be called Madani surahs or Makki surahs, even when they were revealed in Makkah itself after the opening of Makkah. But basically surahs are divided between the Meccan surahs and the Madani surahs. The Meccan surahs are divided again into two broad categories. The one is the early Meccan surahs and then the late Meccan surahs, and then you get the Madani surahs after that. The early Meccan surahs, the one that we just read by the way was one of the late Meccan surahs that combines existential, personal issues, human beings and their relationship with God, and begins with sacred history, the prophets who had preceded the Prophet Muhammad, and deals with extensively with people of Ad and Thamud, the narratives of different prophets. Largely, most of the ulama will say, or the mufassirun will say, when they deal with these ayat, that the major reason for the revelation was to offer some kind of consolation to the Prophet, peace be upon him, that he's really part of a larger chain, and that what was happening to him, or the persecution that he was enduring, was reminiscent of what had preceded or had gone through with other prophets. Jamil will distribute them in a moment. If I can have my Qur'an, my cells, shukran. Thank you. And then, of course, all of us know the Madanan surahs. They lay the socio-political foundations for this new society and its religious obligations, and it is there where Islam takes on a more concrete shape, for want of a better word. One of the ways of identifying the ayat, it's generally when they deal with matters of faith, of aqidah, with deeply personal issues, they often Meccan. The Makki surahs, for example, always start with Ya ayyuhan nas. The Madanan surahs always start with Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, O humankind. And the Madanan surahs start with Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, O you who have attained unto faith. Michael Sells devotes a lot of attention to the construction of the Qasidas and says that there are three major elements in pre-Islamic Arab poetry, that were the three dominant elements in pre-Islamic poetry, and that continue to characterize much of poetry for years after that, for centuries after that. And you can see themes of this inside the Qur'an, despite the fact, of course, that the Qur'an claims it isn't, it's not the language of a poet. The Qur'an comes with there are some differences, and I'm not a linguist to really go into the subtleties of these differences between the Quranic Arabic and the Arabic of the poet. But Sells argues that there were three essential elements in the way the odes or the qasida of the Arabs were constructed. The one is the remembrance of the lost beloved, the quest, and the boast. That should be C, not D. If you have your Sells books with you, and I will quickly read from there. Sells says that the Qasidas were constructed with three major sections. The Lost Beloved, I'm on page 8 now. And let me check if my pagination is the same as yours. If not, we're in a mess. No, we understand the pagination is the same. The odes were constructed with three major sections: the remembrance of the lost beloved, the quest, and the boast. The poetry was heroic in values, lyrical in form, and dramatic in idiom. Remembrance of the beloved was based upon the broken relationship between the lovers and the beloved. Earlier on, he had sketched the scenario of the Bedouin, of people in the desert, late at night, setting up camps, transporting from one place to another continuously. And so he continues with that. Remembrance of the beloved was based upon the broken relationship between lovers and the beloved. Love affairs began when the Bedouin tribes met at the fairs, would be broken off as the tribes separated to pursue the year-long effort to find pasture grounds. The second part is the quest or the night journey, the middle paragraph of the next page. The quest or the night journey began when the poet broke out of his reverie and set off along across the desert on a camel mare. These desert journey scenes involved an almost surreal evocation of the heat of the desert day, the terror of the night, the hunger, the deprivation, the disorientation of the journey, and a confrontation with mortality, without consolation of an afterlife. The final section, the boast, featured the reintegration of the poet into his tribe and the singing of the tribal values of generosity, courage in war, and the willingness to stand before death unflinchingly. This boast was often based on a poetic evocation of the sacrifice of the Bedouin's camel and the distribution of meat to all the members of the tribe. The prime value was heroic generosity. The generous hero, the Karim, was one who was willing to spend his fortune on a night's feast, to sacrifice his camel mare for the tribe. Indeed, the camel sacrifice became the most important ritual and heroic moment in pre-Islamic Arabia. And so we'll come back to the idea of the Karim. But these are basically some of the themes that Michael Feld speaks about that characterized Arab poetry before Islam. And you'll see how some of these things run through the early Meccan surahs. But more important, how these themes are transformed radically. In many ways, here is a quote at the bottom. I'll come back to this quote at the bottom by Izutsu. In many ways, Izutsu says that there is a certain respect in which we might speak of the moral aspect of Islam as a restoration of some of the old Arab ideals. So in some ways, while Muslims always think of Islam as a regeneration of previous religions, you can see in the Qur'an how the Qur'an uses dominant Arab concepts and transform them completely on the basis of a new set of moral values. And the big example that Izutsu uses, as well as Michael Sells, is the example of karama, of what is a Karim person, and we'll come back to that in a moment. So just to go back to Sells on the values of Jahiliyyah and how the Quran uses these Jahili values, so to say, and gives it a completely new gloss. The Quran retains key Bedouin values such as remembrance, generosity. I'm on page 10 now, the middle of page 10. The Quran retains key Bedouin values such as remembrance, generosity, hospitality, and valor. But the social context for such value is transformed. The remembrance is no longer of a beloved and a lost tribal love affair, but the remembrance is of a deity, of a God, who even when figured in later poetry as a beloved, particularly in Sufi poetry afterwards, that beloved maintains a more explicitly transcendent character. So much of the loving that takes place in early Arab literature is retained throughout the Quran and in Islamic literature, particularly in Sufi literature afterwards. But now the object of that beloved becomes God. And the yearning for the return now is transformed into a yearning to return to God. And that is why the Quran is filled with expressions of وَإِلَى اللَّهِ تُرْجَعُ الْأُمُورِ وَإِلَى اللَّهِ تُرْجَعُ الْأُمُورِ وَإِلَيْهِ الْمَصِيرِ. And this very common one that Muslims use when somebody passes away, إِنَّا لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّا إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ, that we come from God and we are in a state of returning to Him. And so this returning to the beloved then becomes a returning to Allah. The journey through the desert evolves into a moral and spiritual journey, a journey of the human being towards the divine Lord. The generous hero, the Kareem, is still the model of human excellence, but the hero is no longer the tribal chief or even the prophet, but the all-giving deity and the human being who imitates that generosity by working for social justice. And so the Kareem in Jahili these things, it's this as Izutsu has a very nice expression for it, which comes up in a moment. So yeah, Izutsu, that we see the moral aspect of Islam. It is really in some ways a restoration of some of the old Arab ideals and nomadic virtues which had degenerated in the hands of the wealthy merchants of Mecca. In adopting and assimilating them into its system of moral values, Islam purified and freshened them, making their energy flow into certain channels which it had prepared. There we go. Izutsu talks about that earlier on, generosity was an act of bravery, an act of displaying of your wealth, of your power. It was your kareemness or your karama was exhibited through a display of your generosity. And so in some ways it appeared to be an act of giving. You are sacrificing a camel mare for the tribe. It's an act of giving. But it's really, and you still see this in many societies, where you throw a feast and it is ostensibly, well, we can talk about weddings, where it is ostensibly about entertaining your guests, but it is really a display of what you have on offer. No matter how long it's going to put you in debt or badly in debt afterwards, that's another story. Okay, let's not go there. And so now, what Izutsu describes as a man who could make a royal display of his generosity was a true dandy of the desert. And this now gets transformed. A Kareem is now a quality of God. But above all, a Kareem is somebody who trembles in front of God. When the Qur'an says, Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum, that the most akram, the most Kareem in front of God is the one who trembles most in front of God. So the earlier display, where it was a display of generosity, and now the Quran begins to challenge intentions. What is your intention behind this? And the Quran challenges the self so much that it then, in a much earlier surah, even laments the prayers of people, where it says, "الَّذِينَ هُمْ يُرَاءُونَ." So not only is this overt displaying and shameless displaying then condemned, but even prayer is condemned when it is used as a form of when it is used in order to when it is used as a form of show. We'll read through Surah Al-Fajr now, but just before that, there's one question at the end that comes nearly at the in the 5th ayah of Surah Al-Fajr. هل في ذلك قسم لذي حجر. What is there to learn from those who have taken such an oath? Yeah, here we go. Michael Sells on page 16. And we will have a closer look at this surah in a moment. but just some of the values that permeate this surah. The values, I'm at the bottom of page 16. The values presented in the very early Meccan surahs are repeated through hymnic surahs. It's as if it's a hymn, a chant, and we will, later on, I hope we get the time, I kind of overplan sometimes, I hope I get the time to look at the structure of the three surahs that we are hoping to deal with today. So in these surahs there is a sense of directness and intimacy, as if the hearer were being asked repeatedly a simple question. What will be the end of a human life? The framework for this question is the concept of a final moment of truth or day of reckoning, Yawm ad-Din, and on this day each person will be compelled to face up to his or her truths. What have you done? قدمت وأخرت. What have you sent ahead? What have you kept back? We'll come back to that. The premises of these passages is that the human being avoids the ultimate question through self-delusion and avoids acknowledging his own mortality by engaging in the pursuit of wealth and possessions, thinking in his wealth he will never die. يحسب أن ماله أخلد, as one Quranic verse puts it. And so there is a criticism of hoarding in these surahs, the hoarding of one's possession or of one's life. Salt says this idea of hoarding was a standard theme in pre-Islamic poetry. And so the Quran then keeps this idea but transforms it, as it does with the generous hero, the Kareem. It redefines generosity. And so, I think I've dealt with some of that. The whole idea of zakah, for example, as a way of pruning, instead of now displaying, how do you prune, how do you cut? Zakah comes from, it also means to purify, but the essential meaning of the word zakah is to prune. And so these are some of the three major themes that he says runs through the Meccan surahs. The one is that there is a final moment to come, Yawm ad-Din, that everybody has to face one day, and that there is no hiding place. You cannot even hide from yourself. When in a state of shock, in a state of panic, human beings will go around, Ain al-Mafar, where is there a refuge? And then there is, of course, the affirmation of the oneness of God. I want us to turn to page 79 for a translation of Surah Al-Fajr. Do I have it? It's going to be dreadful if I don't have it. No, I don't have it. Jamil, is it on the Jamil? Does anybody know where the Jamil? Ah, here it goes. Just see which surah is that? No. What's that? I handed it out last week? Oh, great. Okay. Sorry if you weren't here last week. حضرتك لو سمحتني هل تستطيع أن تقرأ إلى آية الخمس هل في ذلك قسم لذي حجر من البداية؟
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والفجر وليال عشر والشفع والوتر والليل إذا يسر هل في ذلك قسم لذي حجر.
لو تستطيع أن تعدها وأنا سأترجم خلال الآيات.
نعم.
فإذن آية على آية من البداية. شكرا.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والفجر
By the dawn,
وليال عشر
by the night 10,
والشفع والوتر
by the odd and the even,
والليل إذا يسر
by the night as it eases away.
هل في ذلك قسم لذي حجر
Is there not in that an oath for the thoughtful mind? Is that it?
ألم تر كيف فعل ربك بعاد
Did you not see what your Lord did to Ad,
إرم ذات العماد
the great pillared Iram,
التي لم يخلق مثلها في البلاد
like nothing created in this land before?
وثمود الذين جابوا الصخر بالواد
And Thamud with its carvings in the river Bedrock.
وفرعون ذي الأوتاد
And Pharaoh of the tent pegs,
الذين طغوا في البلاد
who spread oppression through their lands
فأكثروا فيها الفساد
and compounded their corruption.
فصب عليهم ربك سوط عذاب
Your Lord brought down upon them the lash of pain.
إن ربك لبالمرصاد
Your Lord is in waiting.
فأما الإنسان إذا ما ابتلاه ربه فأكرمه ونعمه فيقول ربي أكرمن
Such is the human being that when his Lord tries him with his generosity and bounty, he says, my Lord has honored me.
وأما إذا ما ابتلاه فقدر عليه رزقه فيقول ربي أهانن
But when his Lord tries him with hunger and lack, he says, my Lord has treated me with disdain.
كلا بل لا تكرمون اليتيم
But no, to the orphan you are ungiving.
ولا تحاضون على طعام المسكين
You do not demand food for those who hunger.
وتأكلون التراث أكلا لما
You feed on inheritance and devour.
وتحبون المال حبا جما
You love possessions with a love consuming.
كلا إذا دكت الأرض دكا دكا
Rather, when the earth is split apart, splitting.
وجاء ربك والملك صفا صفا
When the Lord and the angels approach rank on rank arrayed.
وجيء يومئذ بجهنم
When on that day Jahannam is brought close.
يومئذ يتذكر الإنسان وأنى له الذكرى
Then the human being will remember, then the human being will remember, and what good will it do to him that he remembers?
يقول يا ليتني قدمت لحياتي
Saying, if only I had made provision for my life.
فيومئذ لا يعذب عذابه أحد
On that day, no one else will suffer his pain.
ولا يوثق وثاقه أحد
On that day, no one will be held to the covenant he made but he.
يا أيتها النفس المطمئنة
O soul made peaceful,
ارجعي إلى ربك راضية مرضية.
Return to your Lord, accepted and accepting.
فادخلي في عبادي.
Come into among my servants.
وادخلي جنتي.
And in my garden enter. This surah in some ways captures very many of the themes that Michael Selt has just spoken about. Just a word about the Ad and the Thamud that features very often together. Ad was one of the grandsons, the great-grandsons of Nabi Nuh alayhi salam, and they are the earliest recorded inhabitants of Arabia. They're also known as the Arab al-Badia, the perished Arabs, because in some ways no traces were left of them. I should put my... it's a very nice email, a very nice text message. Some of you have seen the ANC's message on Palestine, and it's a very strong message. So it's a text message from from Jessie Duarte, who says that she's getting a lot of hate mail as a result of this message. But aluta continua. Anyway, to come back to the Ad and the people of Thamud. And so it was to Iram where Nabi Hud was sent after Ad was completely destroyed. The Qur'an mentions Ad as a collective, Iram as a capital city for the collective, and then there are these rolling desert dunes of what is now known as the Rub al-Khali. And this is seen, it's the largest desert in the world, in the south of Arabia, covering the south of Arabia, the north of Yemen, and part of the other Gulf countries. It's completely barren. No form of civilization exists there. And it is in Surah Al-A'raf where there is extensive mention of this, of Nabi Salih who was sent to the people of Thamud. لو سمحتني حضرتك تستطيع أن تقرأ من الصفحة الثانية. الصفحة الثانية مش عندك وجود، سامحني. سامحني.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. وإلى ثمود أخاهم صالحا قال يا قوم اعبدوا الله ما لكم من إله غيره قد جاءتكم بينة من ربكم هذه ناقة الله لكم آية فذروها تأكل في أرض الله ولا تمسوها بسوء فيأخذكم عذاب أليم واذكروا إذ جعلكم خلفاء من بعد عاد وبوأكم في الأرض تتخذون من سهولها قصورا تتخذون من سهولها قصورا وتنحتون الجبال بيوتا فاذكروا آلاء الله ولا تعثوا في الأرض مفسدين.
A bit of context to this, to the Ad and Thamud, the things provided in these two ayat, I think. To the Thamud people, we send their brother Salih. He said, "O my people, worship Allah. You have no other deity other than Him. There has come to you clear evidence from your Lord. This is the she-camel of God sent to you as a sign. So leave her to eat within God's land and do not touch her with harm, lest they seize you a painful punishment. And remember when He made you successors after Ad and settled you in the land, and take for yourselves palaces from its plains and carve from the mountains homes. Then remember the favors of God and do not commit abuse on the earth, spreading corruption." This is an image this is an image of the Thamud carvings that still exist in this city in the south of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. It has been preserved in the last 6-7 years. It has been declared one of the international heritage sites of UNESCO. But there's a very strong things both amongst the local Arabs and other Muslims to not visit the place. So the kind of tourists that they have been having there, it's entirely people that have been working on archaeology. Many people think that the curse that visited the people of Nabi Salih, and this is what the kind of homes that they had built, that the curse is still prevalent, and so the place remains in large part deserted, defying Saudi attempts to turn it into some kind of tourist place. So that is the Madain Salih, the plains of Salih. I want us to now move on to Surah Balad, and then I'll do a little bit of discussion on the meanings of the surah itself. Surah Balad. البلد مش عنده البلد فيه موجود خير.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
هل تقرأ آية بالآية فأترجم إن شاء الله؟ سورة بلد لا قسم بهذا البلد. What number is the surah? نعم استمروا من فضلك. تفضل.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. لا أقسم بهذا البلد.
I swear by this ground.
وأنت حل بهذا البلد.
You have come to dwell on this ground.
ووالد وما ولد.
By the begetter and the begotten.
لقد خلقنا الإنسان في كبد.
We created the human being in hardship.
أيحسب أن لن يقدر عليه أحد.
Does he think that there is no power over him?
يقول أهلكت مالا لبدا.
He says, look at the goods I have devoured.
أيحسب أن لم يره أحد.
Does he think that no one sees him?
ألم نجعل له عينين.
Have we not given him 2 eyes?
ولسانا وشفتين.
and lips and tongue,
وهديناه
and
النجدين
guided him to the two high plains.
فلاقتحم العقبة
And yet he did not climb the steep pass.
وما أدراك ما العقبة
And what can tell you of the steep pass?
فك رقبة
To free a slave,
أو إطعام في يوم ذي مسغبة
or to feed the destitute on a day of hunger,
يتيما ذا مقربة
a kinsman orphan,
أو مسكينا ذا متربة
or a stranger out of luck in need.
ثم كان من الذين آمنوا وتواصوا بالصبر وتواصوا بالمرحمة.
Be of those who keep faith, who counsel one another to patience, who counsel one another to compassion.
أولئك أصحاب الميمنة
They are indeed the people of the right.
والذين كفروا بآياتنا هم أصحاب المشأمة
As for those who cast our signs away, they are of the left.
عليهم نار مؤصدة.
Over them a vault of fire. I will just read through Selz's short text on page 83, and then I'll do a bit of a commentary on this verse. The oath, the qasm, at the beginning of the ground of Al-Balad evokes a sign, the ground area, the region, presumably around Mecca, held as a sacred territory. In the second ayah, it speaks directly to the Prophet and indirectly to the other Meccans, in stating, you have وَأَنْتَ حِلٌّ بِهَذَا الْبَلَدِ, and you have come to dwell on this land. The Arab term here is ground, balad, can mean both town and countryside, and there is a difference of opinion concerning the exact area designated by the term, whether it means the town of Mecca or the territory or land on which Mecca sits. Sal says, I've chosen an English term, ground, that can be used, that can be as open in usage as the original Arabic. After invoking as signs the special ground, the begetter and the begotten, وَوَالِدِ وَمَا وَلَدَ, the surah turns to one of the fundamental messages of the early Meccan surahs, condemnation of indifference and callousness towards the orphaned and the poor, as we've seen in the previous surah also. The condemnation of indifference to the suffering of the other is brought back to the sign of the land in a graphic manner. The emancipation of a slave or caring for the disinherited is portrayed as the climbing of a high pass, the steep, narrow, treacherous ledge that rises up along the face of the mountains. And then the surah ends with a divine command to people to counsel one another to patience and compassion, and with a warning to those who deny the signs. Now let me run through this surah briefly. This لا أقسم بهذا البلد, أقسم, the oath was generally in much of Arab literature. The la, it's, of course, most of us know as the la as la nafi, the la of negation. This la is the la of qasam, which sometimes appears in front of a qasam and doesn't act as a negation. And the Salt had gone into what was meant by this balad, but see how the sounds rhyme in the beginning. لا أقسم بهذا البلد وأنت حل بهذا البلد ووالد وما ولد لقد خلقنا الإنسان في كبد أيحسب أن لن يقدر عليه أحد. And that continues until ayah number 6, until the 7th ayah, the ending of the thing, which is a common thing in the Meccan surahs, and we'll deal a little bit more about that later on. But so the first is the end parts, and this is one of the curious things about many of the surahs. Of course, when you read these surahs in English, and and you don't have an idea of the rhymes or the hymnic effects of the hymnic nature of these ayat, it's very difficult for many outsiders who don't have access to Arabic to appreciate this part of the Quran, because quite clearly in a purely cerebral way, in a purely intellectual way, the ayat do not have any coherence to each other. If you look at logic as we understand it, and I know that there is a school of thought, Maulana Islahi, Mustansir Mir, who has written a tafsir of the Quran called Tadabbur Quran, that there has been an argument that there is in fact a common theme that runs through how that connects the one ayah to the other ayah. I don't hold that opinion. I think that very often these ayat are completely disconnected from each other in the purely cerebral sense of the word. There is a particular term that Sels is fond of using. There we go. The shorter Meccan surahs, they are characterized by staccato assonance, a disconnected adverb marked by or composed of disconnected parts or sound cut short crisply. And these are other general synonyms for this word. And a repetition of similar vowels with a stressed syllable of successive vowels. And so this we have seen particularly in most of the Meccan surahs, we see this. And so you see manifestations of it in front of us here. لا أقسم بهذا البلد وأنت حل بهذا البلد ووالد وما ولد, and that which begets and was begotten. لقد خلقنا الإنسان في كبد, that we have created humankind in difficulty. And then أيحسب أن لن يقدر عليه أحد, challenging the istighna, challenging the independence, the I can do it on my own, I, my wealth, my position, the dominant tribal values of Arabia at that time. So أيحسب أن لا يقدر عليه أحد, do human beings really think that there is no other power over them? يقول أهلكت مال لبدا, he says, look at the goods that I've devoured. أيحسب أن لم يره أحد, does he think that nobody sees him? And then, so here all the accusations, it's God wrestling with human beings. And then God says, no, but there is agency. There is agency. All of this, fine. But there is accountability and there is agency. أَلَمْ نَجْعَلْ لَهُ عَيْنَيْنِ, haven't we given you two eyes? وَلِسَانًا وَشَفَتَيْنِ, and a tongue and lips. Can't you see? Haven't we given you a tongue to testify and lips with which to speak and to utilize? Okay, وَهَدَيْنَاهُ النَّجْدَيْنِ, and we have given human beings, we have shown human beings two paths. And this is a bit of a difficult one. We generally connect the word hidayah to guidance only in a positive way. Here the Quran uses the word hidayah in a negative way also. وَهَدَيْنَاهُ النَّجْدَيْنِ, that we have given human beings, we have shown human beings two paths. We have shown human beings two paths, and yet فَلَقَتَحَمَ الْأَقَبَ, he did not take the difficult path. And so very often, you have people saying that it's very easy to practice Islam, it's easy to be a Muslim. It's not. There are some seats inside, in front, for people who are right at the back, unless they're busy with other things, like checking email, or there are a few seats at the back, you will be able to see me, but not the board. Yeah, but oh, I don't know if we have that many. Up to Iqbal, yes?
No, they can come, there's some sense here.
There are some, yes, you can, yes. I wanted to, the Quran refers to Jahannam, asking when it is full to the brim, فَهَلْ مِن مَزِيد, is there more to come? but it may not be the most appropriate. Sorry, oops. And so often people in a very simplistic say, that Islam is an easy religion. It's Allah says, the Qur'an says, فَلَقَتَحَمَ الْأَقَبَ. And then this is the common expression that occurs in the Quran, وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا, and what will convey unto you what the steep ascent is. And then, very interestingly, two sets of things is this aqaba. The one is a social responsibility, and the one is a responsibility that you owe to the transcendent, that you owe to God. But the first aspect of this aqaba, of this difficult path that is mentioned, is not the aspect of your responsibility to God or the necessity of believing in God. In fact, the Quran says, وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا الْأَقَبَةُ فَكُّ رَقَبَةٍ, to free a slave. This is the first part of the steep path. أَوْ إِطْعَامٌ فِي يَوْمٍ ذِي مَزْغَبَةٍ, or to feed on a day of misery. يَتِيمًا ذَا مَقَرَبَةٍ, an orphan, an orphan, ذا مقربة, in your family, أو مسكينا ذا متربة, or a poor person who's fallen on hard times. And then very interesting, ثم, then, only then, كان من الذين آمنوا وتواصوا بالصبر وتواصوا بالمرحمة. So this kana is both you become and only then will you become. It's both a kana that instructs, you should become, يعني كن من الذين آمنوا, become among those who have attained unto faith, and who encourage each others to fortitude, and who encourage each other to mercy and compassion. So the thumma kana, then you must become, but also means only then have you become. And then there's an interesting one, أولئك أصحاب الميمنة, these are the people of the right. والذين كفروا, those who reject آياتنا, our signs, هم أصحاب المشأمة, they are the people of the left. عليهم نار مؤصدة, upon them a vault of fire. Before I comment on left and right, one of the difficulties, and this is an ideological point that I want to make, one of the difficulties that so-called moderate Muslims, I think if they are honest, will find insurmountable in relation to the Quran. So-called moderate Muslims and all liberal Muslims, that they will find insurmountable in relation to the Quran is the idea that the Quran has a haqq and a batil, has a truth and a falsehood. The Quran speaks about Jannah and Jahannam. The Quran speaks about ma'ruf and munkar, khair and shar. And the Quran here, through Ashabul Mash'ama and Ashabul Maymana, speaks about the people of the left and the right. And so there's a division of people. This whole idea that all people are okay, everybody must be loved, everybody must be cared for, we must find a space for everybody. It is not an idea that one can find in the Quran. How you define your haqq and your batil, that may be something else. How you define your khair and your shar may be something else. But the idea that this world is meant to be a world wherein everybody just lives happily together and hug together, it is an idea that is completely inconsistent with the Quran. All the Meccan surahs, for example, is very, very clear about its denunciation of practices, but also of people. how do those who insist that the Quran and Islam has a space for everybody, how do they justify the appearance of, say, Abi Lahab in the Quran? Tabbat yada Abi Lahab. Where the Quran names a particular person and says, may his hands be cursed. Now, it's not very nice. How can you say you should be saying nice things about people and so on? And so clearly the Quran, my read, not, I don't know, empirically, I don't think it's, I don't think there's any space for a reading of the Quran that insists that anything goes in front of God. In all the ayat that we have read so far, we see a very clear intolerance towards injustice. We see an intolerance towards people that reject the weak and the marginalized and the poor and so on. And so this whole idea, you know, that Muslims must kind of cuddle everybody and Islam is about peace and harmony and so on. These are, well, they're not, I mean, they have been particularly accentuated after September the 11th, but they're not post-September the 11th ideas. There have been ideas that have been in strands of Islam for a long time. Yeah, I don't want to go on and on about this, but because it comes out in many other ayat of the Quran. I think that this is a very interesting challenge, this Ulaika Ashabul Maymana and Ashabul Mash'ama. Generally, and it's one of the things that I haven't thought through, it's an idea that I have, but I haven't really thought through it. It is that there are certain categories in the Quran that seem to be clearly, that seem to discriminate against certain categories of people. The Quran synonymizes, for example, leftness with badness, and or left-handedness with badness, and right-handedness with goodness. And I often wonder, how do left-handed people feel when they read these verses of the Quran? Of course, I hope we're living, I mean, some of you may know of a generation when you were beaten. You know, you were hit if you use your left hand. And of course, you remain left-handed for the rest of your life. Although you kind of wiggled, you know, to get your food when in front of your, I think it was often fathers who did this kind of hitting. So this is one of the issues that I haven't quite resolved, this left-handed, right-handedness in the Quran. Yeah, of course, Naeem was smiling when this ayah was being read, because in current political terminology, this also has implications, you know, where the leftists are the good guys and the right-wingers are the bad guys. So I don't know, Naeem, what do you have to say about this?
No, I have a theory about this.
Yes.
You see, the life of this world and the hereafter is like a pinhole camera. If you think of a camera, and you know, you have a reality and then a reflected image, and the pinhole is death. But on the reflection, everything is reversed. So what's on the right here is on the left on that.
Brilliant. That's great. So on the reflection, everything is reversed. So all the right-wingers will end up in?
On the left. On the left hand. On the left side.
They will end up in hell. So you say go to hell to all these right-wingers.
The Qur'an is saying.
Huh?
The Qur'an is
The Quran is saying. Naeem, wait, for the moment you are saying it. Let's stick to that. You become as bad as all these other guys, Naeem, who once they've got an opinion, they go around saying that the Quran has said it. Okay. Are there any questions that you want to raise around this surah that we have in front of us, Surah Balad? You have it on page 82 in your book, or any of the comments that I made on the surah. Yes.
I was wondering, how do we consolidate that idea of unity in the context where people seem to be divided? I don't know if I'm trying to make sense here. So, while there seems to be a lot of division in terms of people don't get along, based on, you know, whatever ideologies that they might have, And while we've established that there is this discrimination that's found in the Quran, how do we sort of consolidate our interaction with people in that sense then?
Well, that's a bit of a long issue. I mean, it's a bit of a. I'm not quite sure if I can offer a response to that. I'll give it a shot. I think there are ways of negotiating depending on different circumstances that you negotiate differences. And the Quran's options range from Ya ayyuhan nabiyyu harrid al-mu'minina ala al-qital, O Prophet, spur the believers on to battle, to wajadilhum billati hiya ahsan, and argue with them in the ways, udu ila sabili rabbika bil hikmah wa maw'idatan lil hasana wajadilhum billati hiya ahsan, call unto the path of your Lord with wisdom, and argue with people in the ways in which are best. So sometimes the Quran encourages civil, polite, the best way discourse, and at other times the Quran says no, people must fight back, people must resist. Yeah, so it really depends on the nature of the interaction and what does wisdom, both what does wisdom require of us and what does justice require of us. You don't have your homes bombed on an ongoing basis and then say what are the ways in which it is, and to engage with them in a nice civil discourse. The Quran sometimes demands that whether you're happy with it or whether you're not happy with it, that you have to fight back. So, yeah. Nani?
So if I can make a comment about, I think that and what you said earlier on about liberal Muslims, etc. I'm a bit of shaky ground because I haven't thought through this carefully enough. But I think that the condemnation kind of thing that you're talking about in the Quran falls into two categories. The one category is specifically groups of people or individuals at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. So for example, Abu Lahab. That's him. It's not. There's no other Abu Lahabs. It's referring to him, or the Munafiqun. It's not any hypocrite who doesn't do what it's that group of people in Medina, right? So that's the one category. The second category is in terms of the hereafter, and usually the left and the right that Allah talks about is how they would be categorized in the hereafter. That, of course, we as human beings have no say over. Allah describes what kinds of actions would lead to that, but we have no say over who is going in which direction. So in real terms, both of those categories are out of our control. So we are now left to deal with everyone else in our own time, because we don't live in that time, on the basis of the two kinds of extremes that you spoke about. And we negotiate those. In negotiating those, we also, however, are not in the place where we are able to make those judgments. So I might say that Allah requires of us in terms of the Quran that we must fight against Netanyahu and Obama and their armies. Okay, that doesn't give me the right, however, to say that Netanyahu and Obama will be either on the left or the right in the hereafter. That is not within my purview. So all of that is really left open to how we negotiate it, and depending on their actions towards people generally, if that makes sense.
It does. Thanks. Are there any other questions? And sorry, could you stand up, please?
My name is Tasneem. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. You know what? In light of what is happening, first I must say, I know this is not a political stuff, but I think we should all send an email to ANC thanking them for showing the support for something that we all feel so strongly against what's happening. Number two, I commend the people of London. If you go and see on Facebook, I'm ashamed I went yesterday. We all say that, you know what, we're all for Palestine. There weren't many people to show support. I assume maybe because we're working and stuff like that. So when we talk about unity, when we have time to stand and show our unity, you know what? I think it's very easy to just send emails and stuff and being comfortable at home. But do that. But I want to know, Professor, I don't know if you had interaction with Saudi Arabians in terms of unity. I don't understand. Quran talks about unity and us being united as Muslims. and the Quran came from them. How do they?
The Quran didn't come from them, but carry on. If you can
Well,
read.
sorry, not from them, but obviously
Mercifully
Nabi
not.
Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and you know,
Yes.
they understand the language better than I do in any case. So how did they, when you talk to them about unity, what do they say?
Okay. Thanks. I don't know. I've never spoken to the Saudis about unity.
I'm asking you if you had ever interaction with them.
Well, you can't speak about them. You get Saudis and you get Saudis. It's like you get South Africans and you get South Africans. One should be careful, I think, to not generalize about any particular. You can talk about the rulers of Saudi Arabia. You can talk about particular sectors of the society, but it's not an easy question to answer. But I've never had any serious discussions with Saudis about the question. Yeah. But I'd like to move on, if it's okay with you, okay? The next surah that I want us to look at is Surah Al-Infitar, in which this assonance, this staccato assonance, comes out much stronger inside the Quran. We'll try to get some time to look at the detailed rhyming inside this surah.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إذا السماء انفطرت وإذا الكواكب انتثرت وإذا البحار فجرت وإذا القبور بعثرت علمت نفس ما قدمت وأخرت يا أيها الإنسان ما غرك بربك الكريم الذي خلقك فسواك فعدلك في أي صورة ما شاء ركبك كلا بل تكذبون بالدين وإن عليكم لحافظين كراما كاتبين يعلمون ما تفعلون إن الأبرار لفي نعيم وإن الفجار لفي جحيم يصلونها يوم الدين وما هم عنها بغائبين وما أدراك ما يوم الدين ثم ما أدراك ما يوم الدين يوم لا تملك نفس لنفس شيئا والأمر يومئذ لله.
If you can just pass these around. Any extra pages left over from this side? They're gone. We printed 150 for a room with the capacity of 50. Goodbye. Most of the papers out. Anybody didn't get one? Okay, we're ready to go. Now? Hey. حضرتك أنا سأقرأ الترجمة الآية بعد آية. We'll go through the reading again and I will read through the translation. And you've got the text in some form in front of you.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إذا السماء انفطرت
When the sky is torn,
وإذا الكواكب انتثرت
and when the stars are strewn,
وإذا البحار فجرت
and when the seas are poured forth,
وإذا القبور بعثرت
and when the tombs burst open,
علمت نفس ما قدمت وأخرت
then will know a soul what it has given and what it had held back.
يا أيها الإنسان ما غرك بربك الكريم
O human, what has deluded you from your generous Lord?
الذي خلقك فسواك فعدلك
Who created you, then formed you, then set you right.
في أي صورة ما شاء ركبك
In whatever form he desired, he set you.
كلا بل تكذبون بالدين
But rather you call a lie the reckoning.
وإن عليكم لحافظين
But indeed over you are guardians,
كراما كاتبين
generous writing.
يعلمون ما تفعلون
They know what you do.
إن الأبرار لفي نعيم
Indeed the innocent are in bliss,
وإن الفجار لفي جحيم
and the wicked are in Jahim.
يصلونها يوم الدين
Burning in it on the day of reckoning.
وما هم عنها بغائبين
And they are not from it to be absent.
وما أدراك ما يوم الدين
And what can tell you what is the day of reckoning?
ثم ما أدراك ما يوم الدين
And then what can tell you what is the day of reckoning?
يوم لا تملك نفس نفس لنفس شيئا والأمر يومئذ لله.
A day does not have a say, a soul for another at all. And the amr on that day is with God. Is there an extra page? Oh, cameras. Oh, there is. So there's one right in front. Thanks. Thank you very much. Now, this surah, like a number of other shorter Meccan surahs, deal very directly with the event of Qiyamah, of the event of Qiyamah, and traumatic, dramatic, apocalyptic, a complete inverse of everything that we know. إذا السماء انفطرت, when the sky is torn, and when the stars are strewn, and when the seas are poured forth, and when the tombs are burst open. These kinds of imagery appears in very many of the shorter Meccan surahs, basically conveying the idea that all your perceptions of reality will come to naught on the day of judgment. That your understanding of what is and what is not, your experiences, your senses, everything is reduced to nothing. And then in a very dramatic way, the Qur'an speaks about how when the tombs are burst open, then will a soul know ma qaddamat, what it has given and what it has held back. Self, in his commentary on this ayah, which was it Self or was it some other text that I had read in preparing for this? I think it was Self. In his commentary for dealing this, speaks about how both what you've sent ahead, meaning, akhirah, as in literally meaning that which is to come. What have you sent ahead for your akhirah? Ma qaddamat wa ma akharat. And what have you held back? What of good that you could have sent, what of your own potential that you could have realized, did you realize, and what did you not hold back? What did you send ahead? What did you send ahead for this journey, and what did you what did you hold back? I'll come to the sounds of these verses in a moment. Where was I now? You saw what in علمت نفس ما قدمت وأخرت. And then lamenting nearly, يا أيها الإنسان ما غرك بربك الكريم. What has deluded you about your generous Lord? الذي خلقك فسواك فعدلك في أي صورة ما شاء ركبك. The most interesting part of this, it may sound a little bit tedious, but I do want us to go through it because it gives you an idea of the value of understanding the Quran and seeing how the meaning of the verses is sometimes located in the sounds rather than in how well the ayat are organized cerebrally, or what we know to be rationally. So we go through cells on page 160 that everybody has in front of them. The verse endings first. From ayah number 1 to ayah number 5, there are these very abrupt, disjointed, and at the same time, by their very disjointedness and their abruptness, they are connected. So they give meaning. All of them are abrupt. All of them have these rapid endings, and it has an impact on the listener. إِذَا السَّمَاءُ انفطرت وَإِذَا الْكَوَاكِبُ انتثرت. There he lists some of these words. They're all based on consonants and short vowels. But here in ayah number 6, it changes. And the ending is now in Kareem. All the at has ended. Ya ayyuhal insan ma gharraka bi rabbikal kareem. If you can just read that verse for us again, yes.
6.
Ayah number 6.
يا أيها الإنسان ما غرك بربك الكريم يا أيها الإنسان ما غرك بربك الكريم يا أيها الإنسان ما غرك بربك الكريم.
If you look at the third paragraph of Cells there on page 160. So this ayah number 6 offers a complete and radical change from ayah number 1 through to ayah number 5. The staccato patterns and the consonants give way to a completely to a sequence of long vowels. Ya ayyuhal insan ma gharraka bi rabbikal kareem. The long vowels pick up the long vowels that were in the center of the verses 1 through to 4, but extend them throughout the surah. The long vowels allow the reciter to bring out the sadness and the plaintive quality of the lament given in the verse. And when the Qari read it for us, you could see that in the recitation itself was this lamentation, this sadness, this pathos that is in the ayah itself. O human being, what has deceived you about your generous Lord? And this lament contrasts in tone with the roughness of the previous verses and the evocation of the apocalypse. So the first 5 ayat sounds very rough. It's the end, you know. There is this dreadful event that is taking place. And it is, the abruptness is reflected both in the meanings of the words and this unprecedented, unknown, unexperienced, in our wildest imaginations, or perhaps, I don't know, I'm not into fiction, but I think fiction, they do produce these kinds of things. I don't know, Allah. You know, the Qur'an speaks about what the eyes have never seen and comprehended. Anyway, and then you can actually see in this ayah number 6 how all of this is now interrupted by this. God, now, why? This is going to happen. Is there any way that I can prevent you, that I can warn you, that I can alert you? And so in a very loving, in a very sad tone, in fact, this ayah then reminds human beings of their own ability, of their own delusions. And then the next few ayat goes on into describing who this verse is. The second paragraph. In verse 1 through to 5, 7 and 8, the consonants and the long vowels at the end of the verse are balanced by the long vowels in the center. In verse 1, the is extended further by the mad. So there are 2 major sound patterns here. The long vowels down the middle axis of the surah, and the consonant abrupt patterns at the end of the lines. And cells actually show this. Some of them you see in the longer sounds, he shows in bold, and the shorter ones he shows in italics. And you can actually see, if you look at the page, you can actually see how they fit in the, you know, إذا السماء وإذا الكواكب وإذا البحار وإذا القبور. He actually shows how the ayat are structured. Now, if you look at, you can see meaning, you can see coherence in the structure of the ayat. But this meaning eludes you if you were to listen to the sounds of the texts, and it would elude you if you don't know the meaning of the text. And one of the things, the great things I think about Selz's translation, although it is of a limited few ayat, is that he succeeds in conveying some sense of both how the sound transmits meaning, as well as the cerebral or the intellectual meaning of the words itself. Verses 7 through to 8. يا أيها الإنسان, can you حضرتك ابدأ من يا أيها الإنسان تفضل إلى آخر. نعم إلى في أي سورة ما شاء ركب.
يا أيها الإنسان ما غرك بربك الكريم الذي خلقك فسواك فعدلك في أي صورة ما شاء ركبك.
So here we see, after the interruption of the Kareem, it reverts back to the short abrupt sounds. فعدلك في أي صورة ركب.
ما شاء.
Sorry, في أي صورة ما شاء ركبك. And then it reverts to the second, to the earlier distinction of the longer in sound. فإذا كلا بل
تكذبون بالدين.
نعم
أبدأ من هنا.
نعم إن كلا.
كلا بل تكذبون بالدين وإن عليكم لحافظين كراما كاتبين يعلمون ما تفعلون إن الأبرار لفي نعيم وإن الفجار لفي جحيم يصلونها يوم الدين وما هم عنها بغائبين وما أدراك ما يوم الدين ثم ما أدراك ما يوم الدين يوم لا تملك نفس لنفس شيئا والأمر يومئذ لله.
I would encourage you to go through this surah on your own and looking at finding the rhymes and trying to, just what we did with the earlier part, to do it on your own. I don't want to spend all the rest of the time on reading the rest of the Sal's text. But there's one other interesting part, and Sal's has a whole chapter on it, on gender and sounds in the Qur'an. And here is a paragraph at the bottom here. I'll just read through it quickly. The ha in some surahs. There's a non-personification at the bottom of page 162. The ha in some surahs clearly refers to women. In others it refers to objects with only grammatical gender. In others still, it forms a partial personification that merits translation as her. In verses 15 and 16 above, وَمَا هُمْ عَنْهَا بِغَائِبِينَ وَمَا يَصْلَوْنَهَا يَوْمَ الدِّينِ وَمَا هُمْ عَنْهَا بِغَائِبِينَ. On verses 16 and 17 above, these two verses that I've just recited, the antecedent of ha is jahim. This mysterious word associated with the fate of the rejectors at that day of reckoning. Translated, ha, in this case as her, would be unjustified. But in the Arabic, it does take on a tinge of gender association, not only from its grammatical gender, but also from the way the word ha has become a sound figure for a feminine being in other surahs involving the day of reckoning. While a translator might make a decision to translate some of the words as implicit personification, choosing him over her, in other cases, where the choices has to be it, the Arabic still carries a gender undercurrent that cannot be conveyed in English. And so the Meccan surahs particularly have a very strong female gender element to it. If you take the time to, I hope that you, I mean, I don't want to tell people what they should be doing in Ramadan, but I hope that you do actually take a time to read, you know, some Qur'an in Ramadan, and just begin to reflect a bit on the shorter Meccan surahs and see how this ha as the feminine, the strong feminine undercurrent that appears inside the Meccan surahs. Then there was another point that I wanted to make. The sounds of the last few ayat that we read, after Innal Abrar Lafi Na'im, and then when the Aims start after that, all of those verses has the same tone of lamentation to it. Again, reflected also. So we're dealing here with a God who, through expressions like this, ثُمَّ مَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا يَوْمُ الدِّينِ, again, وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا يَوْمُ الدِّينِ, what will tell you what this day of Dain is, this day of debt is, this day of settling scores is. ثُمَّ مَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا يَوْمُ الدِّينِ, again, what will give you an idea of what this Yawm al-Din is? A God that laments, that yearns, that it's this, what is this expression that we use in Afrikaans, you know? Ek trek my hare uit, you know, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do to convey to you an adequate sense of the reality of all of this and the reality of the return to your transcendent. So there's this combination of this pathos, this combination of a sad, and I know that I'm using human qualities, but I'm prepared to go ahead. This sad, a lamenting, even a grieving God. It's like a parent, you know, wat hartseer is vir sy kinders, dat die kinders nie wil reg sê nie. It's a, and at the same time knowing that, you know, fairness and justice and the earlier warnings that you have given does mean that punishment and the child must be taught, you know. And so there's this combination of a God that is prepared to cause havoc. I'm using an everyday expression. Throughout this year we see this, that is prepared to cause havoc and at the same time continuously reach out to human beings in order to get those human beings to draw themselves closer to him. So to summarize then, in the earlier surahs, in the earlier two that we did, we saw quite clearly how accountability to Allah, how belief in the transcendent is contingent on how we deal with other people, and you find out a singling of the marginalized. So there is a singling out of the marginalized. There is a call to look out for the poor, look out for the orphan, look out for those who are going through a particularly rough patch. Okay. But, and this is something that very many just ordinary good people are good at, looking out for the weaker one. Okay. But the Qur'an doesn't only ask this and doesn't only do this. The Qur'an also denounces. And so in some ways, you know, the story of Mother Teresa that I've often told in other contexts, yeah, it's a bit of a longish story and I must finish. it's like, you know, and I shouldn't have said the story of Mother Teresa, but it is like you see this baby coming down the stream at the bottom of this hill or this mountain, and you pick the baby up, you know, and you care for the baby and so on. You may be a single mother yourself, you may be not a single mother, you may be not able to have children, other needs of yours may also be filled by looking after this baby. And then another baby comes, you know, and then another baby comes down. And so at some levels we imagine goodness, or we imagine religiosity to be about caring for those babies who are coming down the river. But babies don't come down the river. Babies get thrown down the river. It's like the way we use the word slavery, as if slavery just happens. No, it is enslavement. Or the way we use the word poverty, as if it is just something that happens. No, systems impoverizes. People are impoverized. There's an agent behind poverty. And so in the Meccan surahs we see this denunciation of hoarding, the denunciation of exploitation, the denunciation of gathering and accumulating, and this ana rabbukumul a'la, this alam yaqdiru alayhi ahad, does he think that nobody has power over him? So there is a denunciation of all of this on the one hand. And on the other hand, a call to caring. Go, pick up the babies. Pick up the babies. But you also ask questions. Who is throwing the babies down the river, down the mountain? And the person who says, wait, I may miss a baby or two. If you want to, you can set up a whole industry of orphanages at the bottom and develop a really great name for yourself and become the Mother Teresa of the world. Develop a great name for yourself, catching. But the person who says, wait, what's going on here? And goes up to the top of the hill and confronts the person killing all these children and throwing these children down the hill. Or that is confrontation. But at many levels, many of us think that our religiosity is about the one. So when these poor Palestinians are being bombed, you know, we must rally and give money to these for Gaza and give money for these poor suffering Palestinians for Islamic relief and Waqful Waqifin and so on. That's fine. Mother Teresa's are needed. But, and I'm not touting for the organization whose chair I am, but when Boycott, Divestment and Sanction South Africa comes and asks for money for political action to stop Zionism, for a boycott of the Zionist state of Israel, then Muslims don't have money for political work. Our hearts get broken for the victims once the babies have fallen. When you say I need money to go up the hill to go and confront Taghut or to go and confront Fir'aun, then he says, no, you know, I'd rather give my money. People are not resentful about money for Islamic relief or the Zakah fund and so on. I can see some stalwarts of. I'm only saying that the Qur'an combines this harshness and the need to confront systems and individuals, the need to confront power with the gentleness of reaching out, the gentleness of caring for the victims of oppression. Let me finish there. Shukran, Jazakallah khair. Thank you very much for coming.